Yo, what's going on, everybody? I pray that you can hear me right now. We had random tech issues off the rip. I hadn't gotten the live stream started yet, but I noticed that my voice was not registering on my microphone. I exited the stream. I came back in. It seems to me like everything's working, but I'm not a tech guy. You guys have heard from me many times. I am not here to be a technologist. I'm certainly not going to purport myself as one. And I'm just hoping that everybody can hear me loud and clear right now. So if you can, let me know with a thumbs up in the chat. I appreciate everybody for being here. And without further ado, guys, let's get into this show. We've got UFC Macau going down in just a few hours, right? If you look, we have a very rare 3 a.m. start time, Eastern Standard. Shout out to everybody who's rocking with us. I'm seeing thumbs up. That means people can hear me. God bless you guys. Fila says sharpest chat in the game. That's all of you guys. Thank you for you folks for assembling tonight. And we're doing it in short order, right? We're going to try and find these winning spots just before the card gets started. If you guys are new here, welcome aboard. I appreciate you guys for being here. What I wanted to say is bets and banter. We start at the bottom of the card. We work our way on up to the top. So we will talk about the main event. We will talk about Deiveson Figueiredo. We'll talk about Petr Yan. That'll be a little bit later on. What we want to do, we want to circle back to some of the fights on first look that we may have given a little bit of short shrift, right? We talked about there's a lot of tape that needs to be done on a fight card like this. A lot of road to UFC athletes, a lot of people making UFC debuts, so to speak. So I think that there's a lot of interesting spots to talk about. And without further ado, we're going to dive into it with all of you guys, with the sharpest chat in the game. I want to say this. I've got 1 cup of coffee in the odds mug. I've got another cup of coffee in the L mug. So we are absolutely strapped and ready to talk about fights. We are well caffeinated. We are hydrated. We got a nice cup of water as well. So there's nothing that could stop us. Feeling very fired up for this week. And without further ado, guys, let's start with the first fight on the card. We're talking, of course, about Mahasate, the legend of Mahasate. If you've listened to the Dogger Pass podcast for some time, they've been talking about this guy. He's a very personality-driven fighter, goes out there, kill or be killed, certainly. If you look at his win over Steve Garcia, it's probably aging better than most of the wins anybody on this card could claim, right? Knocked out Steve Garcia. Since then, Steve Garcia on a 5-fight knockout streak. So you have to just say, man, this guy Mahasate clearly has power, not afraid to get in there and swing with people. But we saw in the Slava Borshev fight some of his limitations. Still a guy who's, capable of getting hit cleanly, getting put down. We know that Slava Borshev has his own flaws and liabilities, right? That's been brought to, account in the UFC. So you look on the other side, Nicholas Motta, he's a guy that has, 2 UFC wins under his belt. But what do they really tell us, right? Like if we look at the Tom Nolan win, Tom Nolan was coming in piss and vinegar, a little bit cocky, to be frank, right? The guy chin up in the air, swinging wild and reckless, gave Motta no respect. And Motta was able to answer with some big shots, able to put hands on him and hurt him. The thing I liked about that performance from Motta, the confidence, right afterwards, he had some whole little thing he was saying, Brazil in America. Like he was doing his whole little bit. He was fired up and ready to go. But what else did I notice? The finishing instincts. He hurt the guy. He never let him off the hook, man. He spun behind him, got to his position, landed the ground and pound. And honestly, I thought it was his best performance in the UFC, not just because he won, but because it was against a better opponent than Cameron Van Camp. And he showed good finishing instincts, not just on the feet, where we know he can bang people out. He's got power, but he also showed he'll follow you to the ground. He'll advance his position if he needs to. He'll use ground and pound to get the show closed. And I thought that was a good look for him. When I think about this fight, I think both guys have a chance to win this one violently, right? 31 years old for Motta. I think he's a little bit less durable than Mahasate. You look 5 losses inside the distance for Motta. Mahasate has been a harder guy to get out of there. Additionally, if Motta was a guy that just had this lights out ground game, then I would feel, maybe he had a little more upside here as an underdog. But I don't know that he's a very good submission grappler. We've seen more often than not, he's been on the wrong end of, submission grappling exchanges. If you look at the fight with Trey Ogden, whom I'm certainly not trying to compare to Mahasate grappling skill for grappling skill, but you look at that fight, it was a complete audit, right? Trey Ogden took him down when he wanted to, held the top position, and honestly just got robbed of a finish, right? He had him in a choke, and whether he was going to win a 30-27 decision or whether he was going to get this guy tapping out of there. I thought that Motta was really screwed in that Trey Ogden fight, and they screwed Trey Ogden instead, right? They just decided, referee error. This guy doesn't get his money. This guy doesn't get his win. It's complete fugazi. So I think about this fight as Mahasate, 24 years of age. He does look like he's got some fight miles for a guy who's only had 13 fights. Like he does fight like a guy, who's been out there and is a little bit more weary of the big exchanges now. I thought we kind of saw that a little bit against Gabriel Mowgli Benitez. Gabriel Benitez in the wrong portion of his career, right? Getting up there in age. But certainly he's up there in fight miles and gym miles from all the wars at AKA. And you look at a guy like Mahasate, I expected him to finish a guy like Benitez in terms of like where you'd want him to be at. Going out there, getting the decision win, very controversial fashion, very close fight. You take your hat off to the guy, but it didn't tell me like he's the next best prospect breaking down the door in the UFC. I do think he's got what it takes to knock out somebody like Motta, but I don't think that he has the tools to cover this kind of price tag over the long period of time. Like, for me, Mahasate, it's his situation, his context. I think he's the deserved favorite, but he's a guy that I don't know that you could trust to go out there and fight with an optimal game plan, right? The Steve Garcia fight, he was just out there swinging bombs. He connected first, put him down. Hats off to him. If they ran that fight back, I think Steve would be a favorite, and rightfully so. So I think that Mahasate is my pick here. I think he's going to get the win, but do I want to go out there and lay the -190 when Motta in this spot, probably coming in with more confidence than he's ever had in the UFC, coming off of a nice win? I don't know. I think that he's got some things working against him, traveling all the way out here to fight Mahasate. But I'm not sure where Mahasate bases his camp this day and age. I think he's done some training in the States, if my memory serves. This, for me, guys, not a fight I was supremely interested in betting on. When I looked, let me go ahead and take a glance at my idea board for this fight. I think I mentioned that the under was at plus money, which I do find a little bit interesting in this fight. Both of these guys seem like they are more than happy to go out there and have a wild, brawling type of fight. Looking at my notes, let's see what we've got here. Yeah, the under 1.5 sitting about plus 123, and the ends by sub is about 8.5 to 1. I don't think either of those are very likely, but I think both of these guys, the under I think is quite likely. The ends by sub, the only reason I highlight that number is I think both these guys are pretty bad grapplers that are liable to get hurt in this fight. And oftentimes we see, you think of a guy we're going to talk about a little bit later, Timberell. He's got Art of the Knockout as his nickname, but then he goes out there and more often than not, he submits these guys after he hurts them. And I think that in this kind of fight, they're both tough enough guys. I don't think either one of them quits at the first sign of adversity, but I do think both of them can be hit really hard. We've seen Motta get put down with strikes. Manuel Loco Torres hit him with that huge shot. Jim Miller dropped him badly in the second round in his UFC debut. So I think that, Nicholas Motta, a little bit more experience, 31 years of age, a little bit further along in his development maybe, but I don't know if he's as durable. So give me the local fighter here in Mahasate as the pick, but certainly not with a tremendous amount of confidence. I remember thinking last time out, I was a little disappointed by Mahasate and his performance. Speaking of disappointing performances, guys, we'll move on to the next fight of the night. And Quang Bang Lee, I thought overperformed most people's expectations. I thought he was a solid enough fighter coming into the UFC against Chris Gutierrez. I thought he was going to go out there and give Chris an honest fight, and he accomplished that. But what he didn't accomplish was getting the win. He didn't land that much offense, in terms of significant strikes. And he did gas out a little bit. He took the fight on short notice. I think that's understandable. I think he secured a couple takedowns there as well. For me, the problem with Quang Bang Lee is he's 33 years of age. He's coming into this fight against a Chinese athlete in China. I'm not sure that he's going to get a fair shake if this fight goes to the cards. Last time out, I thought Long Xiao had an argument to win. Certainly, I didn't think it was a lock that he was going to win the fight. But he went out there. He did get outlanded on significant strikes. He did, I believe, get outworked in the second and third rounds. I'd have to go back and look at the stat line specifically. But shout out to Cashville Rican, newest member on the channel. God bless you for it. A name that's been around here in the sharpest chat for a very long time. So thank you to you, my brother. You're the man for that. Now, back to the breakdown, you've got the younger fighter here in Long Shao, who is the local market fighter, and he's going to be a little bit bigger here, 5'8" compared to 5'6" on the Tapology listing. So the anthropomorphics, such as they have a favor to give in this fight, you would think it's with Long Shao. The other thing I will note here is he's the younger athlete with more professional experience. Typically, that's something I look for. If he was an underdog, it would be a system type of play. When you look at how it maps out here, do I think the right guy's favored? Yes, because I think he probably gets some benefit if the fight goes the distance. I think he's more likely to spam volume, output, offense. But on the other side, I don't think Kang Bang Lee is like the same level as the guys he's been fighting. I think he's a little bit better. I think he's a little bit more powerful as well. If you look at Long Shao and what went wrong against Christian Quinones, he got his ass beat, man. The guy's tough as an old leather boot. He's willing to walk forward into damage, keep taking big shots. He got busted up in that fight. His face was bleeding all over the place. And, if you look at Kang Bang Lee, I think his best chance to win this fight would be to hurt Long Shao and be opportunistic with the finishing. I think, like I said, he might get wrong done if this fight goes to the cards, even if it's close, even if he deserves to win it. So for me, that's the ultimate cap on this fight. I think the right guy's probably favored, but Long Shao doesn't strike me as a great finisher at the UFC level, fighting to very close split decisions with, in my opinion, mid-level opposition. So I think it's, a fight that if it was in Vegas, I might consider betting on Kang Bang Lee here and hoping that he could go out there and produce a finish. But I have a feeling he's just going to get outworked here ever so slightly. I think skill for skill, Kang Bang Lee probably a touch better, but skills aren't the only thing in fighting, in my opinion, that you have to consider. Sometimes you have to consider who's going to give the judges more to score. And I think that is Long Shao's benefit in this fight, that he will just spam offense, take a little bit more risks. And maybe the full training camp for Kang Bang Lee allows him to go out there and be a little bit more assertive with his offense, but just didn't see enough volume and activity from him last time to feel confident backing him this time. Shout out to Cashville as well, who just joined the channel, says, hit the like button for the OG Liam. I appreciate you very much, my man. Thank you so much for the support. I won my first ever MMA bet on Dubronx when he beat Kevin Lee at the beginning of the COVID saga. Shout out to Mark Schillingberg. That's when I fell in love. Been addicted since. Love it, Mark. This is a tough one. I agree with you, Phil. I think that this is a really tricky fight. So I think final prediction, I'm going Long Shao by split decision. This isn't Long Shao going to go get easy money. I think Kang Bang Lee is going to give him everything he can handle, maybe get a couple takedowns, maybe land some hard shots of his own. But ultimately, I just feel like the stat line at the end of the night probably going to reflect that Long Shao did a little bit more work. And that's what I fear here. All right, guys, next one up. This is a banger of a fight. Loner Kavanaugh, Jose Ochoa, big money line underdog here, about plus 300 on the Jose Ochoa side. Our guy Monotone says that was my only pass. Totally makes sense. Our guy says Kang Lee by decision. I don't hate that shot, man. If he's able to get the takedowns going, or if he's able to match that volume, maybe use that power to dissuade Long Shao from throwing so much, I think that would be big for him in terms of how he can go out there and get the win, spring the upset. But looking at this matchup, we're in the flyweight division. Loner Kavanaugh, guys, broke open the Dana White Contender Series with a bang, right? Antoine Ho, he's a highly touted prospect, deservedly so. I watched the tape on Antoine Ho. I knew he was a good fighter coming in, but I did highlight in my Contender Series article at the time, the plus 600, I believe it was, on Loner Kavanaugh to win the fight by knockout was wrong. I thought the ITD at plus 350 was wrong as well. And he did go out there and knock him out pretty quickly, put a stamp on it. That was an incredible performance by him. And if I look at this fight, the first thing I notice is you've got an undefeated fighter in Jose Ochoa. I do think that he's solid, right? If you look at this guy and you watch his tape, I think you will come away from it saying this guy can win UFC fights. You watch the way that he fights, and he's aggressive, he's assertive, he knows what he's doing when he's out there in terms of he wants to be in your face, landing hard strikes, pushing you backwards, asserting himself, and when he wants to take you down, he tries to take you down, mix it up there. It seems like he's comfortable fighting from a few different phases. Do I know about his ground game if he gets put on his back? No, I have a couple questions there, right? Why do I have questions? He's not fighting anybody that could really push back and resist and offer him something that, would make him second guess his game plan. His game plan so far has been, I'm going to walk you down. I'm going to stalk you. I'm going to finish you. I'm going to beat you up. I'm going to treat you like you're a nobody. And it's been working, right? The guy's been doing a great job. All of his wins are finishes in the first 2 rounds. So when you have subpar competition in front of you, do you want to be out there going 15-minute decisions, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, the Bo Nickel experience, right? When they give you somebody that they think you should be higher level than, they want to see you go out there and clean them up. And so on the Peruvian regional scene, Jose Ochoa been doing an absolute sensational job, right? The guy knows how to go out there, get you out of there, put big shots on you, make you second guess why you're out there in the first place. And he seems pretty aggressive. And, is he super technical? Maybe leaves a little bit to be desired there, but he's very effective. And in fighting, I'd much rather have somebody who's effective than super clean with everything they do. On the other side, Loner Kavanagh, he doesn't struggle to be an effective fighter either, right? This guy started off with a pretty ugly amateur run in terms of his win-loss record, right? Things weren't so hot, but the guy clearly put everything together when he started to become a professional, when he started to get serious about fighting. And you see the guy's skills, they're evident on tape. The athleticism, evident on tape. The guy can do standing backflips after he knocks somebody out, and he can make it look pretty effortless on both accounts. Right? When you look at the fact that he's been to 15-minute decisions, he's signed the dotted line against guys like Antoine Ho and other tough individuals, both regionally and in the Contender Series. I think it gives you a picture of Loner Kavanagh confident, ready to fight right now with very good fighters. And for me, Jose Ochoa at 23 years of age, he's just a touch too young for me, right? Where I typically talk about there's nothing wrong with a young fighter, right? You want to have young fighters, get them experience, get them developed, but physical maturity is something that typically happens for men. And obviously we're not going one-to-one every man at every time, but on average, right? About 25 years of age is when physical development is going to end if you're a man. So Loner Kavanagh right now should be essentially the end, the peak of his physical development as a man. And now everything else is going to be technical. It's going to be about adding skills, about refining these things, about getting experience. But his physicality right now should be ideally as good as it's going to get, right? Like maybe he can make some minor improvements by continuing to stack these marginal gains year over year on top of each other. But his physicality should be as good as it gets right now. Jose Ochoa, still a growing young man, right? 23 years of age, not that much younger, but it could make a huge difference, right? I could just tell you when you're 18 years old and you come into a college wrestling room, feels a lot different than when you've been in there for a year, when you've been on the college lifting program, all these kind of small little details where 18 and 19 can feel like a massive difference. Now, shout out to Glenbot in the chat. Ochoa was massive at faceoffs. You look at the stat line here in terms of what do the anthropomorphics tell us? Yeah, the anthropomorphics tell us he was going to be way bigger. 5'7" compared to 5'4" on the height barometer. No reach listed for this matchup. I'm sure we could pull that up on UFC stats, but no surprise, it's going to be Ochoa with the slightly longer reach in this contest. I think that for me, the price is prohibitive on the Kavanagh side, right? Do I think he should be favored? Absolutely. Do I think it's possible to favor Ochoa when he's never been the full 15 minutes and you don't know that he could fight hard when the going gets tough? I think that would make it hard to favor him here. But then it's a question of, what is the line in terms of how are we going to see this translate? Minus 400, can he cover that price? Is he going to wrestle him? Is he going to avoid taking big shots? I think that this is going to be a very competitive first round. I would not be surprised to see both guys, landing big shots in the first round, getting after each other. But for me, the one differentiator, the one reason I lean towards the Kavanagh side is who ultimately gets the win here is I think he's a proven, conditioned athlete. I think that he may get the benefit of being the local market fighter, so to speak, if this was to hit the judges' scorecards. And I think that it's going to be the kind of fight where Ochoa is, pretty physical guy, pretty strong, pretty assertive early. But number one, when you have a height differential this big and somebody that's never really been tested in the wrestling and grappling, I think there's a chance Loner Kavanagh is able to grab takedowns in this fight and work him to the mat. The reason I had said KO and inside the distance for Loner Kavanagh on the Contender Series is because I do think he's shown fight over fight in his tape pre-UFC, pre-Contender Series I'm talking about, that his grappling was making big improvements over time. And for the Jose Ochoa side, maybe he's got wonderful, sensational grappling. I've never seen him grapple with anybody worth their salt. So in his gym, he's probably getting some pretty good work in, making the improvements there. I don't think he's going to be an easy mark on the ground, but could I see him getting taken down, ending up on his back? That's one of the things that height doesn't always help with, right? It's just staying upright. Sometimes that could lead to you getting tipped over, landing on your back. And if you don't have the right skill set, it could prevent you from getting back up to your feet. So, Glenn says neither guy finished as a pro, so goes to decision looks pretty solid. To be fair, I get what you mean there, but the one thing I will note is Antoine Ho was undefeated, right? And if you looked at that, you would say to yourself, like, man, these guys are probably going to go the distance, probably going to be super competitive, back and forth fight. I would have said the same thing. My lean here is towards a competitive fight that probably goes the distance. However, I think there is a chance that both of these guys are pretty powerful for the division, right? Pretty willing to throw for this flyweight division, get in there and put hands on each other. So I wouldn't be stunned if somebody got hurt, got clipped in this kind of fight. They're both young, right? And when you're a young fighter, you're typically very aggressive and you're prone to making some minor mistakes that could cost you. You zig when you should have zagged in fighting and it could all be over. It could all be different. So I think that Loner Kavanaugh is the pick here. But I do think Jose Ochoa will have his day, will have his say, will get his wins in the UFC. It just might not be, this night against this opponent. I think Loner Kavanaugh was being set up for success by the UFC, period. When you look at how they booked him on the first fight of the season for Contender Series against a really tough opponent, and they want to strap a rocket ship to his back. So now it's on him, right? He's got to go out there and do the work. He's got a tough opponent in front of him. This is a barometer. Where are you really at? But I think he's got the skills to pay the bills. From what I've seen on tape, I do think he's a real deal fighter. So I don't know that he's going to cover these kind of prices. Like I said, I think it might be a negative EV decision for the favorite, but I think Kavanaugh is going to land some stinging shots. He's going to be the most resistance Jose Ochoa has ever faced. No doubt about that. And I think that it's going to be a hell of a scrap. Trent, the Mexican, says, I really love Kavanaugh here. Got him by TKO or decision, double chance to find some better parlay value. Fair enough, my man. Best of luck to you. Ochoa's ground game is a real unknown for me, but Loner Kavanaugh, no wins by sub to this point as a professional. So next up, guys, let's talk about this fight. We got another fight going down in the flyweight division. Carlos Hernandez, my man's been dealt from the bottom of the deck over and over. They gave him a lot of really tough outs in this flyweight division. Tatsuro Taira put him in the box at 125 pounds. That was the first guy to ever stop him with strikes, right? If you look, Tatsuro Taira, pretty powerful guy, a guy that has always had underrated power, in my opinion, in his hands. Brandon Royval, ate some huge bombs from Taira, and all I could do was take my hat off to the guy. That guy's got a chin from south of Hades. But Tatsuro Taira, when he lands with big impact. He's got big hands. And I think that when we saw Carlos Hernandez go down there, it told me maybe the chin is starting to show a little bit of wear. But Tatsuro Taira just had good finishing instincts, knew how to get him out of there, hurt him, followed him to the ground, never let him off the hook. And I really appreciated that. Shout out to our guy JB in the chat as well, friend of the show. My guy TU says, what do you think of Ochoa's level of competition? No bueno. Doesn't mean that he's not a good fighter, but the guys he was fighting were not good, in my view. They weren't all terrible, like the worst fighter you've ever seen, but nobody was UFC quality, is how I would put it. Now back to this fight, guys. Carlos Hernandez goes out there. He fights Tatsuro Taira. All right, that's a bad one. You could give him a pass there. Then you say, all right, Alan Nascimento. Guy's a very, very quality black belt. Went out there, instantly took his back, put him in a bad situation while they were dry. Really tough. So I say to myself, okay, Carlos Hernandez, those are two tough losses. This Ray Sayura fight, I thought he was going to go out there and give him a run. I believe I bet him as a pretty big underdog in that fight. And maybe that's why I was so bitter about him on first look, right? I was like, Carlos Hernandez, man, like he let that fight slip through his fingers, whatever. And then my guy, Nate, shout out to Nathan Brown in the chat, frequent commenter, very sharp guy, and he's in the Patreon as well. And what he had said was, he was like, you know what, your memory didn't serve you in that instance. It was a really close fight, went back and forth. He ended up getting, I believe, 4 minutes of control time. I think 6 the other way. Nobody landed any strikes in that fight. It was horrific. But if you think about it, Carlos Hernandez is one of these guys that he's got skills in every position, right? Can he wrestle? Yes. Is he solid on the mat? Yep. Is he a good striker? He's not a bad striker by any means. So you say to yourself, this guy is pretty well-rounded, pretty good everywhere. And his opponent here, I am not going to butcher his first name, but Tumendemberel. That's how I'm going to try and pronounce this. Art of Knockout. I mentioned in an earlier breakdown, this guy, Art of Knockout, sounds silly when you go out there and have all these submissions. But if you watch his last fight, they should just call this guy the Art of Violence, because number one, nobody has more fun when they're fighting than Tumendemberel. Tumendemberel is out there in a split decision on the road to UFC. This was, I think a season or two ago. He goes out there and he is literally like smiling ear to ear in a fight that was cardio intensive, back and forth, takedowns in either direction, both trying to kill each other on the feet. The guy just seems to have a love for fighting, and that's not something you could coach, right? Like Brock Lesnar would be a fantastic fighter, but then when he would get hit in the face, he was like, I do not like that at all. You can't train that out of somebody for the most part, right? And sometimes the reason why guys get shop worn by fighting is because eventually the human body tells you to stop, right? You get hit in the face and you've been hit in the face a million times. It's like, I don't want to feel that again, right? And so fighters then aren't the same in terms of their willingness to engage. When I look at Carlos Hernandez, I say to myself, the guy's got skills everywhere, but I worry that he may be lesser than the sum of his parts. Meaning, the guy can fight everywhere, but if he starts slow in his fights and his durability may be starting to wane, he had 1 million amateur fights, guys. Like I think the guy had 15 amateur fights before he ever went pro. So the guy did a lot of his fighting at the amateur level, and now he's up here. He only lists 13 fights. I think Aussie Fight Fan says Hernandez sub, and we're definitely going to talk about that, because I see this fight as somewhat binary. I think Hernandez is a slow starter, guys, and I think that Tumendemberel is a fast starter. He comes out in his fights, and he's trying to kill people. Like, he's not out there trying to point fight. He's not out there trying to spar. He's trying to really hurt you bad. And is he the cleanest fighter you've ever seen? No, he's less skilled than Hernandez for sure. Like, there's no doubt in my mind about that. But he's super aggressive. I think he wants to be there more than Hernandez right now in the fire. And that, for me, is the thing that makes this fight scary. I think that when I look at the pricing, I could see Hernandez by sub, which I do. Some people are saying if the fight gets late, because Tumendemberel spends a lot of energy. He's very aggressive. He goes for the finish, and I could see him making a mistake, falling over the top. Hernandez gets on top, starts to capitalize. He's a pace guy. That's what Carlos Hernandez has done to win his fights in the UFC. But if you look back at his resume, he's got a lot of split decisions against guys that are supposed to be here, and the guys that are really good in the UFC have run through him. So then I say, okay, what do we have with Hernandez? We have a guy who's skilled. We have a guy who's got solid cardio. If this fight sees the third round, I think he should be the guy who's expected to win that. But I think in the first 2 rounds, he's going to be getting hell from Tumendemberel. I think Tumendemberel is willing to take huge risks on the feet to try and do damage. So could I see him getting hurt? Yes. But could I also see him hurting Hernandez really badly? I could. Tatsuro Taira doesn't get the credit he deserves for his striking, but his striking is solid and powerful. And Tumendemberel is also pretty solid and powerful with his striking. It's not the most technical you've ever seen, but it's heavy. And he can kick the legs off of people as well. So he's going to try and throw big low kicks and then get into the pocket and throw big hammers at this guy. And if he's able to hurt Hernandez, that is where I think he could actually win by submission. Tumendemberel is an opportunistic submission artist. He's not Johnny Jiu-Jitsu. He's far from it. That's why his grappling, pure grappling for grappling, Hernandez is a better grappler in my view. But who is more violent? Who is more assertive about trying to finish people? I think that's Tumendemberel, and I think that will be evident in the first round. So, fun fight, great scrap. I understand why there's been two-way action. I think Monotone hit the sharp angle here, right? Hernandez round 2 and 3. I'll just go ahead and share this on my screen. So I make a activity board on Patreon each week, and my idea board, right? I'm looking right now at Hernandez KO 13-1, which I know is a little bit unconventional, but it kind of coincides with the round 2 and round 3 shot that Monotone just made, right? So I have the same thing in my document. I have the Tumendem KO and sublines as what I shouted out. Like, if this fight goes the distance, I think something has probably gone wrong for Tumendembarel. Jay Watt says, from my perspective, I'm hearing 2-men decision. Interesting. I don't know about that. I agree with you, Liam. I think he gets bonked and sub before it gets to round 3. So that's sort of my binary breakdown, right? I'm with Monotone on the later the fight goes, the more Hernandez is live. I think those round props are pretty live at the big plus money numbers. Would not fault anybody for taking those. On the opposite side, I think that the finish props are somewhat live for Tumendembarel because the guy is a super aggressive fighter. He comes out there with the intent to kill. That fight that went to split decision, he did try to finish that guy. And that other guy was pretty darn tough and resorted to a lot of panic takedowns to, kind of stall him out. And that's the other thing that makes me, feel like Hernandez, it's hard not to favor him here because Hernandez has gotten a lot of takedowns in UFC fights. And when you look at this guy, his ability to defend the takedown is simply not good enough. He's got to get better at that or he will get found out by better UFC fighters because his ground game is better on top than it is off of his back. I don't think he's, going to be throwing up great triangle chokes and things that'll surprise Hernandez. I think the way he submits Hernandez would be he rocks him on the feet, grabs a hold of his neck, and then chokes him violently unconscious like he did to that last guy on Road to UFC. So really fun scrap here. Really fun scrap. My guy JB also says, I think the draw more likely than 2-man decision. Man, that's funny. 2-man fast starts, gets 2 rounds. Hernandez comes on late and wins the 3rd. Possible split too. I don't hate that look. I did definitely shout out a bunch of split decisions on this card as well. So we'll talk about that more as we go on. Okay, guys. Next up, we've got, please forgive me because I'm going to butcher these names. I watched these fights on Road to UFC, but I can't even remember. It was all a blur to me this morning. So I'm going to go with Zhaikao Feng against Ming Shi. And this is a fight where, massive size difference. That's what's going to jump out at you if you just look at topology for these two women. 6-inch reach advantage, 5-inch height advantage, also for the younger fighter. So every anthropomorphic box being checked by the Feng side in this matchup. At 22 years of age, a little bit young for me. I always worry that those fighters could have mental collapses, kind of just underperform based on pressure, getting to them, right? It's one thing to be an adult, serious professional. It's another thing to be 22. But here's the thing. She's got experience under her belt, right? 12 fights now. She's fought former UFC fighter, maybe current UFC fighter. I'd have to double check. She certainly hasn't won a UFC fight, but not Liang, right? I think she was maybe 17 or 18 at the time. So she's been fighting for some time now and getting that experience, right? Ming Shi on the other side seems like a fighter that, I don't think she's got the athleticism really to compete at the UFC level. She does seem to me to be undersized for this division. And normally when you have somebody who's undersized, what you tend to see is their standout in one skill category. Their submissions are amazing. They could get the fight to the ground with their takedowns. They kind of got to have something to overcome that. And I don't know that she has that. I think that you can take down Feng. Feng is somebody that doesn't have the best takedown defense I've ever seen, but she fights somewhat long. She's worked in a couple of her own takedowns in the road to UFC as well. And I think she might be physically stronger than Ming Shi. So I think that Feng probably wins this fight however she wants to. When I go back to the breakdown that I did here, I listed Feng decision as a way to buy down the chalk, right? -167. You were seeing some sharper books held it at -250 or so. So definitely a big difference there from some markets to others. You always have to look and try and be price sensitive on these props, especially. Props can have a massive disparity in the market. Same thing with Feng sub at 13-1. Most books had it 10-1 and under. The fight not to go the distance is similar to her ITD price. I would certainly rather have the fight not to go the distance than the ITD if they're priced similar, just from a long-term strategic standpoint. If I was on the Shi side, I would just take the money line. Basically, it's like hoping for upside on a women's underdog in a fight that it's kind of hard to cap because both women are fighting low-level competition on the road to UFC. So it's a little hard to get a beat on it, right? It's also two Chinese women. Is somebody going to get the benefit of home field advantage, so to speak? You don't really see that necessarily. The other thing I'll mention here is the submission line is 18-1 for Shi. And if I look at Ming Shi, she does have 6 wins via submission. That is the majority of her finish wins. She only has 1 win via KO or TKO, and the vast majority of her wins are via decision. So I did just find it a bit odd that the submission was priced all the way at 18-1. I think that for a WMMA fight, the submission lines all around are quite wide because neither one of these women are good grapplers. And I always talk about it's easier to submit poor grapplers than it is even for good grapplers to submit other, less good grapplers, right? It's like if both people are competent, they might just have enough to hang on, survive, hand fight, defend. I think either one of these fighters can make a huge error based on incompetence and get finished. Fang by prison stuff, but can she survive 3 rounds? I don't know. I mean, it's a big prices on some finishing angles here. So maybe that's the way to get involved. Oh my God, both these girls have 0 muscles on them. Shout out to Mbe, always keeping it real with the WMMA stuff. There are better Chinese WMMA fighters than these girls. What are they doing here? I couldn't tell you. I sent on Patreon earlier today that I'm not really blown away by most of the talent on the road to UFC. This crop of talent. I'm old. I'm willing to revise my opinion upon new evidence, but I'm just not seeing it. From a talent evaluation standpoint, I watch a lot of Contender Series. I've been doing it for a long time, so my opinions aren't always right. But I was right about Yusuf Zalal, even if it was 5 years too early or whatever it was, right? If you look at this kind of fight, I think Feng is okay, but she doesn't strike me as like the next big thing in combat sports, unfortunately. I think she's just all right, and I think she's going to get the win, but she is definitely being priced prohibitively for a 22-year-old girl that has been taken down on the tape. All right, folks. Next up, let's go back to Tapology. We've got another road to UFC final, and this one pits Kiru Sahota against Dong Hoon Choi. And I like the Sahota side in this one, guys. I'm a little surprised by the odds. It's bounced all over the place. Sahota is plus money in some markets if you look right now. And it's kind of gone, like I mentioned, all over the place. If you look at where it opened on BetOnline, let's go ahead and take a peek. BetOnline opens Dong Hoon Choi minus 170. The line then flipped to Dong Hoon Choi being a plus 115 underdog. He's now back to minus 115. So definitely two-way action on this fight. People are buying back when the number gets to where they want to see it. For me, I do know some sharp money came in on the Sahota side at plus money. There's no doubt about that. Some players that I know in Vegas definitely moved the number. When I'm looking at Dong Hoon Choi, do I think he's a bad fighter? No. Was I blown away by anything I saw from him? No, not at all. I think that when I look at Sahota, the thing I didn't love is that his corner was having to like talk him through, getting through round 3 and like, I felt some ever so slight wilty vibes from the guy. If you know what I'm talking about, just like in that 3rd round, the way his coaches were talking to him. But when I looked at the size, right, the size is a huge factor in this fight. Sahota is 5'10" compared to a 5'5" opponent, 73-inch reach compared to 66.5-inch reach. And is Choy going to pursue the takedowns? I think he got 1 takedown on the road to UFC, if my memory serves. Did he look like a great wrestler or grappler? Not really. Our guy Huevo says, why no guests? I invited a great guest on, and unfortunately the timing just did not work out. They were unable to make the walk this time, but we already have a plan for the next event for them to be on the show. A first-time guest of the show, a first-time friend of the show. So very excited to bring on a guest like we normally do on Bets and Banter, but unfortunately this week was unable to make it happen. So if we have a great friend of the show who pops up in the chat that wants a link to the show, we'll absolutely make that happen. But otherwise, I didn't want to leave you guys high and dry. I didn't want to leave you guys hanging. So we're coming out with a bang, whether it's me or anybody else. All right, but back to the action here, guys. The way I see this is Sahota, he's still on the right side of 30, and he's got more professional experience. I think Dong Hoon Choi can be rebuilt if he loses this fight. I don't think he's a bad fighter. I think he's a competent enough guy, knows what he's doing. But when I'm looking at this kind of, matchup, I'm just saying to myself, I don't see a ton of grappling upside from Choy. I think that the guy who's way longer, taller, can land the shots from further outside. I think that he's going to bank the first 2 rounds here probably at a decent enough clip. And I also think that if he needs to bite down on the mouthpiece, go out there and get it. I just don't know that Dong-Hoon Choi puts out enough volume, enough offense, enough output to keep up if it comes down to who wants it better. So I think it's a fun fight and a decent enough scrap, but give me the size on the plus money. I think Sahota is the side here, and he's got a couple losses on the resume, but I think that's probably contributed to him having better experience here, maybe taking on slightly better opposition. Sahota at Manchester, top team too. Good camp. Absolutely. Love to see it. Good corner as well. So I think that this is, fun fight and interesting one, but give me Sahota there, man. That's the pick. Last but not least, guys, we've got one more Road to UFC tournament finale to break down, and I like the underdog here. I'm looking at Soo Young Yu as one of the youngest grapplers, or excuse me, one of the youngest black belts in South Korea. Also, our guy Jewish Better says he needs to get a new mic, but he loves chatting. Absolutely. Always welcome on the program, my brother. So appreciate you very much. And thank you for listening. Thank you for stopping by. Sharpest chat in the game. Half of the sharp information, guys, is not just on this screen. It's in the chat. So why don't you come join it on the YouTube page? Appreciate you guys that are already here, and we'll continue the conversation from here. Now, Jiu-Jitsu, he's fun, man. I posted a clip of the cartwheel back take that he hit. Basically a throw right into a cartwheel, right into a back take. The guy's fun, clever, does interesting stuff. But the thing that I don't love about his game is, number one, not a very high volume of strikes, right? The guy is typically looking to go out there and implement that wrestling and grappling game plan. I don't have a problem with that, but you need to have a really reliable wrestling and grappling game plan then, if that's going to be what you do to win fights. And he's done well on these Road to UFC fights so far, but I have not been blown away by these guys he's been fighting. And the fact that he's not finishing them with all this control time accrued is a little bit worrisome for me, because I thought Genesuli in his last fight, his semifinal on Road to UFC, he got in a really tough, awkward situation. He was in a takedown exchange early. He then ended up getting taken down, controlled, ridden out in some bad positions for about 3.5 minutes in the first round, almost 4 minutes. And that breaks a lot of fighters, right? Like, a lot of people, they get too tired after getting dominated for one round. They can't rally, they can't recover. And we didn't see that from him, right? We saw him basically say, all right, now it's time to go to work. And he came out in rounds 2 and 3, did what he needed to do, got back on his horse and got the win. Is he putting up crazy numbers like blow your hair back strike numbers? No, he's not doing that. But what he is doing is trying to compete for every position, trying to stay in your face, trying to make it a dogfight. And he seems to me like a guy that has some decent enough experience under his belt. It's been a while since he's been finished, right? Not an easy guy to put away. I think when he got finished via submission, it was right at the beginning of his career. It's been a while since that's happened to him. So could he get submitted here? Absolutely. I think that Yu is the better grappler in the early going of this fight, no doubt about it. But he's another one of these guys that they're having to coach him to like not give up in round 3 on Road to UFC, where they're telling him like, man, you're in the 3rd round, just keep with it. You could beat this guy. Like, he's getting down on himself in a fight where he's having a ton of success because of fatigue, in my humble opinion. And, when you have a Chinese athlete competing in China, they've got more professional experience. They're the much bigger fighter. They're at age parity. I just feel like it's a much easier click for me on the Genesuli money line at plus money than on Yu, who might go out there and dominate positions and then tire himself out as a result, which I think we did see a little bit of on the Road to UFC. So this guy's fun and exciting and probably going to make for a crazy fight. I think that Yu is, live to win by sub. I think the later portion of the fight, Genesuli has some small, KO equity, but I think more often than not, he's going to have to grind out a close decision, earn it. And I think he's capable of doing it. And I think he's a little bit better when it comes down to dealing with adversity. So that's the reason I lean towards Genesuli here. Not great prices, not blow your hair back, but Huevo says, why do you keep talking about me during this breakdown? I thought it was funny. Somebody on Twitter had said, is that you in the clip? And I was like, it is not me, but it is you. So he's got a perfect name for puns, jokes, innuendo, and all the like. But I think that it's a fun scrap, man. I'm excited to see either one of those guys get a chance. I think this is the most talented, fight of the road to UFC fighters. But that's not saying too much. I think that Yu has good grappling. I think his striking leaves a lot to be desired. And I think that Genesuli has good heart, good doggedness, good toughness, wants to be there. But I don't think that he's like the most skilled MMA fighter you've ever seen. He's mostly just a guy that really wants to fight and keep pushing. So that for me is what's going to make him interesting. Might even be a better live entry than a pre-fight bet. Next up, we got Ozzy Diaz against Zhang Minyang. And this is a fight where the much younger fighter is Zhang Minyang, 8 years younger in this spot. Ozzy Diaz is listed as the slightly bigger fighter. I do think his body composition is a little less athletic. I think when you look at Ozzy Diaz, a little bit more soft-bodied at the light heavyweight division. You look at the Joe Pyfer fight that he had on Contender Series, he looked like a different guy. He looked a little bit more athletic, had the hair like he does in the Tapology profile picture, and my man kind of trimmed everything down, went to bare bones, stopped cutting weight, and moved up to 205. And at 205, he still has some speed, right? He retains that ability. I think he's probably the better grappler on paper. I trust American grappling as a general rule, a little bit more than Chinese grappling, just based on what we've seen in the UFC as a large sample size. That being said, do I trust Ozzy Diaz to go out there and press his wrestling, his grappling, trying to get him to the ground? I don't see that. Ozzy is a guy that sometimes mixes it up on the mat, but I think he was submitted on the amateur circuit by Dominic Reyes way back in the day. He's a guy that typically likes to go out there and have these crazy exchanges on the feet. Somebody falls down, he might follow him to the ground. But again, he's just not a guy that I see as like a very processed grappler. On the other side, Zhang Minyang is a berserker. That's how I would describe his fighting style. He comes forward, he's looking to knock you out, and he doesn't make any bones about that. He's not very risk averse, right? He's willing to walk into the pocket most of the time, take big chances, wear, a tiny bit of damage to land big shots and put people away. And I'll just tell you guys, the Tuco's finish, it's one of the most violent knockouts you'll see in the UFC. He's standing over a guy who's already been put down, a guy who already looks clearly out of it, and he's standing over him, just punching him, bouncing his head around, craziness. And then the Brendeson Ribeiro fight, he went out there and just delivered a guy who was coming off a massive upset himself. And, I had picked Brendeson Ribeiro on Contender Series. I picked Zhang Minyang against Brendeson Ribeiro. I was like, this knockout power is probably too much. So then now where do we end up? We end up with an Ozzy Diaz who's 34 years of age, getting a big opportunity to fight with the UFC, but it's in suboptimal circumstances. He's got to come out and fight Zhang Minyang in China, and they probably are never going to admit to, but give him the little speech in the back where they're like, hey, listen, Ozzy, we're a big fan of your fighting style because you always go out there and somebody gets knocked out, man. And, whether it's you or your opponent, we just love that you're so high action and we love that you go out there and put it all on the line. They're going to say every which way, but go out there and fucking swing with this kid and find out, And I think that ultimately the more athletic and durable fighter for this division is Zhang Minyang. So that's why I lean his direction. I think he's going to get it done. I think that the under is more than likely going to hit as well because of the fact these guys take huge risks and they both get in the pocket. So yeah, I see Zhang Minyang knocking him out at a pretty decent clip. He could hurt him and follow him to the ground, but the longer the fight goes, that's where Ozzy Diaz, in my view, becomes live. Zhang Minyang, not a great energy preservation fighter. He's a guy that goes out there swinging to kill. And Mike Tyson used to say you can fight for the knockout or you can fight for the decision. And I think that for Zhang Minyang, he ain't fighting for no decisions, baby. He's fighting for the knockout. So Ozzy Diaz fought Bevon Lewis. He's fought some other guys who have been at a decent level. Joe Pyfer, no shame in losing to Joe, really. So the thing about Ozzy is just he's getting here a little late on in his career. He's getting here in maybe a suboptimal weight class, probably would do better at 185 than 205 in the UFC long term. So these are the things that hold me back from the Ozzy Diaz side. He's definitely seeing some respected action. The line has come, in, out, all over the place. I think he opened up a bigger underdog. If we look right now over on Bet Online, let's go take a look at the market activity. Ozzy Diaz opens plus 250, peaks plus 275, now down at plus 210 on Bet Online. So definitely some sizable movement here on the Ozzy Diaz money line in the lead up to this fight, and nothing crazy, but certainly some people willing to come in and fade Zhang Yang. He hasn't proven that much, so I get it. But for me, you're getting the younger guy with way more professional experience. And even though his professional experience is a little bit lower level, I think that he's just coming into his own right now. I think his confidence is there. I think his momentum is there. And I think he's probably going to land huge bombs on Ozzy Diaz and put him down. So Ozzy Diaz, live as the fight goes on, live if he implements a wrestling and grappling game plan. But if he goes out there and swings, I think he's going to find out the hard way that Zhang Yang ain't the guy you want to trade with, man. Speaking of guys you don't want to trade with, no time Volkan Oezdemir, Carlos Blackjack Ulberg, two light heavyweights with a lot to prove in this one. Volkan Oezdemir is a perennial gatekeeper, right? He's been at the top of the totem pole, so to speak. He fought Daniel Cormier for the belt, came up short in that one. But Volkan Ozdemir's been around. He's been a top 5 guy. He's been a top 10 guy. And Carlos Ulberg wants that. He's hungry for that. He wants to step into these big fights and big opportunities. And if you look at their age, it's kind of surprising, right? They're very close in age for, one guy in Ulberg who looks to be on the up and up, a guy who's a prospect, a guy who's on the rise. Meanwhile, you've got on the other side, Volkan Oezdemir, a guy who some people might look at as a past his sell-by date. He's a post-prime, whatever you want to call it. But ultimately, they're pretty similar in age, these two guys. They're somewhat similar in size. Ulberg's going to be the bigger fighter here. But in terms of pedigree, who's fought more, who's fought better, guys, it's Volkan Oezdemir, no doubt about it. The speed, I do think, is going to favor Carlos Ulberg. I think he's the faster fighter. I think he's a little bit more slick on the feet as well. You look at Volkan Oezdemir, a lot of his fights, where he wins by knockout, the punches kind of look weird and awkward, and he just connects with people and hurts them, man. Volkan has short shots that land with power at times. I think that is a path for him to winning the fight, is to clip Carlos Ulberg on the chin to hurt him. But Ulberg does seem to me like a little bit more responsible as a striker than some of these other guys that Volkan's fought. So I think that Ulberg, we even saw it against Fabio Sharon, where he was coming off of a loss, right? Fell apart against Nzechukwu, and we saw him go into his shell and become a lot more reserved with his output, with his offense. And he's still a guy that, the UFC is very high on. How do I know? This guy this year has been linked to fights with Anthony Smith, Jamal Hill. I'm even drawing a blank on other guys. Like, these are just from the top of my head. They've connected this guy with every big name in the division, essentially. Maybe Yuri as well. Like, they're trying to just set this guy up for a huge fight. And no time, it's kind of tricky because he's not that big of a name. He's like a mid name in the UFC. Certainly not the most recognizable light heavyweight, but if you've been a UFC fan for a while, Volkan. But, he does present a challenge. He does present a step up in competition. So for Ulberg, he kind of got the worst of all worlds in some ways, right? Where it is a higher profile fight, but it's a more difficult fight. And it's not as high profile as a lot of these other fights that may have actually been easier. So if I'm in the Volkan corner, I'm telling him, we don't need to strike with this guy. We don't need to prove that we're tougher than this guy. We need to kick him in the leg. We need to take him down. Those are the two things that we would be looking to do in this contest. Ulberg is not very proven on the mat. He did out-grapple Dawoon Zhang, but that's it, right? Like, he basically has been avoided by or avoiding or hasn't gotten matched up with grapplers for whatever reason. The guy just hasn't fought many grapplers, hasn't fought many people that could get a hold of him. And that's something in his game that could definitely be tested. We saw Bogdan Guskov, who's a solid enough fighter, basically get taken down and hurt badly on the feet by Volkan Oezdemir. Volkan found multiple paths to get to him in that fight. And we've seen Ulberg get hurt before. Granted, it was after he tired himself out, got exhausted, but he did get hurt in that fight and get finished. And we've also seen him taken down before. So I think that Volkan Oezdemir smart enough guy, been around for a long time. I think he's going to be game planning around that, trying to go out there, put this guy on his back, test that if he can. If he can't, I think that it's probably just a fight that looks like Ulberg being the sharper striker who throws just enough to stay ahead of Volkan, doesn't take any unnecessary risks, and maybe he could crack Volkan and hurt him and get him out of there. But I think more often than not, Ulberg, his win here, it would be huge for his career if he goes and knocks him out and makes a big highlight reel example of him. But I think his career would take a step in the right direction if he goes out there and wins by any means necessary as well. So I have a feeling Ulberg stinging jabs to a decision in this fight. That's kind of the way I see it going. But I do understand why people like the Volkan side. In my opinion, he does present some interesting challenges for Ulberg. His experience level is very high. He's fought some of the best. He's trained with very good guys. But there's just something that tells me, you got one fighter moving in one direction and another fighter moving in the opposite direction. And the wins recently for Volkan Oezdemir, Johnny Walker, not really a win that I rate. Bogdan Guskov, solid enough, but a UFC debutant on short notice. You could definitely poke holes in the recent wins for Volkan Oezdemir. And meanwhile, for Carlos Ulberg, he's on a pretty solid win streak right now. 6 wins in a row in the UFC since losing his debut. And Fabio Chiron, Tafon Nchukwi, Nikolai Negamariano, Ihor Poteria. What do they all have in common? They are not nearly top 15 guys. But Alonzo Menefield, Dawoon Zhang, those are both fringe-ranked light heavyweights. So I do think we've seen Ulberg be brought up slowly, be brought up, the right way. And I think he's ready for this step up in competition. So for me, the pick is Carlos Ulberg, but again, price prohibitive. Light heavyweight fights invite some volatility, and Volkan Oezdemir, very quality fighter in his own right. I know a lot of sharp players that are looking at that side, but I got to go with my gut here. My gut did say Ulberg from the beginning of the week. And after looking at it a little bit closer, I think Volkan's going to compete. But I just think Ulberg's probably going to be a step ahead of him on the volume with the striking. Despite Volkan winning via sub round 3 against Zhang, he looked pretty tired. Volkan contested if it goes late. Yeah, I totally agree with you, actually. I think what you mean there is Ulberg, my brother. So shout out to Luke from Sparring with Reality, the absolute man, friend of the show. He was talking about the fact that Ulberg was starting to gas out a little bit, but Dawoon Zhang was even more tired and made even more mistakes and gave up a bad position there, got choked. So I do think we could see if Volkan Oezdemir is smart, him test that grappling for sure of Carlos Ulberg, because it's something that not a lot of guys have tested, man. I think he's only given up one takedown maybe in the UFC, but very few guys have tried with committed offense. All right, folks, next up, we've got Wang Kong taking on Gabriela Fernandes. Whoo, boy. This is a hell of a scrap, man. When I look at this one, here's what I think. I think, number one, Wang Kong is being set up for success by the UFC in terms of how they've marketed the fight. They got her in her Joker face paint again. She's out there showing off the personality, and she's against Gabriela Fernandes, who has been struggling in the UFC. No two ways about it, right? Giving up takedowns, that's been a big problem for her. Also, being a punching bag for strikes. Crispy Carly Judas, I believe, is 3-2 as a professional. I'd have to go check that. But she does not have a bevy of, MMA experience. She's a very inexperienced fighter. And I thought she was a live underdog against Gabriela Fernandes. I thought she probably deserved the split decision there. Didn't go her way. No crying over spilled milk. Fair enough. But you look back and Gabriela Fernandes having a hard time, winning that fight, right? Against Teresa Bleda, hardly survived, right? Was in really compromised situations. She did well in the 3rd round there. If you guys remember, she landed some big shots, like a nice low kick. Teresa Bleda looked like she might quit on herself, and then she got a takedown and just was able to easily ride it out to win the fight. You look at Jasmine Jasudavicius, took her down, dominated her physically, owned her in the clinch. I believe she was an underdog in that spot. So the market doesn't have a good grasp on Gabriela Fernandes, how she should be priced. And on the other side, Wang Kong, what I see is a girl that could go out here and get takedowns if she wants them. Shout out to Nandalal in the chat, says Judas got a takedown with a single underhook. So yeah, I think that Wang Kong is physical. I think she's strong. Her grappling is largely untested against solid MMA opponents, but from what we have seen, it looks aggressive. It looks to be serviceable enough that if she wanted to take down Fernandes, I think she could do it, to be fair. And then I look at the other side of things and I say, if this is a striking fight, Gabriela Fernandes is comfortable striking. She likes being on offense on the feet. I just don't think she's very defensively sound at all. I think she's a walking punching bag, very easy to hit for most of her opponents. And she does have some power, some hard low kicks. I think she's a decent enough striker, but they're not doing her any favors. They haven't since she got to the UFC. She's lucky to be 1-2 in the promotion. She could easily be 0-3 and staring at, a pink slip right now, but instead they gave her one more fight. They're flying her all the way out to China to take on a woman that they would love nothing more than to promote her versus Valentina Shevchenko, a fight, 10 years in the making. She fought her all the way back in 2015. So for me, I think Kong Wang probably does what she wants in this fight. And maybe she has more competitive minutes early than people are expecting because Gabriela Fernandes is a tough chick and she's a willing striker. But I think that at any point, Wang Kong can implement the takedowns if she wants to. And I also believe that if she doesn't do that, she is the better striker. I think she will win, whether she hurts her and finishes her or just outpoints her to a decision. I like the Wang Kong side here. Kong is badass. Hope she keeps winning and then faces Shevchenko. That would be awesome. The real question is, does she get the finish? Only English word I hear her say this week was bonus. I love it. I do think she can finish. And also, you always have to think about it like this. When you're a fighter, what can you go and get, right? Can you get something, by doing what everybody else has done? Yeah, but it's harder, right? It's harder to get some great new respect when you go out there and do something that other people have done. Nobody's gone out there and finished this girl, right? Fernandes has been pretty tough. She's hung tough in fights where she got mounted, where she got her back taken, where she got her ass kicked. So she's a tough girl. She doesn't want to just go out there and quit. But do I think she's going to hang up there with the skills? I don't quite see that personally. So I think she is going to get finished here. But I also think it might be late. I think last time out, Victoria Leonardo kind of ran onto some big shots early and went down. Kong by KO wide. Judice landed 110 head strikes. Kong needs 30. I think that's fair play, Moise, but I also think the ground game of Fernandes is real bad. So if Kong Wang takes her to the ground, I do think she could submit her too. But if she's looking for the bonus, Uncle Dana likes signing bonus checks on knockouts. And in WMMA, they don't come around too often, right? The last time we saw a good flatline KO in the UFC's octagon for WMMA that I can remember, Kong Wang. So Wang doesn't have crazy power, to be honest. She has decent pop. It's not crazy. I think that's fair enough. I think the TKO is live, right? I think positionally, Fernandes is a disaster class on the mat. And I also think that the submission is live. So good notes, Mbe. Too bad they can't wheel out Leonardo for Gabby. Yeah, maybe they will, right? If they sign her to another contract, they'll have to find somebody for her to go beat, man. Wang is a Sonda master, which has some grappling. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. You could see it in her her ability to flow and move from position to position. She's just a much more natural athlete, I feel, than Fernandes as well. Fernandes, she looks like an athlete, but she looks like a bodybuilder as compared to a combat athlete. And again, that's not to disparage her. It's just to say, she looks like the kind of person you push them in the chest and they fall over. Whereas, there's some people that might not look muscular. They might not look hulking, but they're nimble, right? And I don't think she's really like that. Wang sub 3. Wee, says Pepe Sylvia, one of the sharpest in New York. Shout out to my brother. Hey, Victoria just won on Invicta. You're damn right about that. I forgot. We watched the great Victoria Leonardo go out there and get back in the win column. Much deserved for her. So ultimately, yeah, I think the Joker is getting the finish there. That's the way I see it going. But I don't think, Fernandes is a pushover. So maybe look at the late props potentially. Kenan Song taking on Muslim Salikhov. And, this is a perplexing fight for me because the line continues to move against Kenan Song. And I will say he looked like absolute shit against Ricky Glenn, but I have a feeling he kind of just phoned it in, Ricky Glenn. I don't know that he needed to put together a great training camp to beat that guy. I don't know that guy really wanted to be there. So he went out there, landed some decent shots, couldn't put Ricky Glenn away. But the one thing you want to note is Ricky Glenn went from a guy who was cutting a lot of weight to 145 and 155, to a guy that was fighting up in weight. And so I think that looking at this fight, Kenan Song could definitely be clipped in the chin. We've seen that from him before. Muslim Salikhov, king of Kung Fu, still got some power, still got some nimbleness, right? To quote last fight, still has some dexterity, can throw some kicks, but I don't think his cardio is very good. I don't think his output is super reliable. It's okay. So as far as I'm concerned, like when I visualize this fight, Muslim Salikhov to me is decent, but he fights pretty close with a lot of guys if he doesn't knock them out or hurt them. And I think that for Kenan Song, he's one of the guys that came very close to putting away Ian Gary. Most people can't say that, but he lands with power. He has 5 knockdowns in the UFC. So I'm hearing people tell me all this week how he doesn't have any power, but he's got 5 knockdowns in the promotion, including against a really good fighter in Ian Gary. So I think that Kenan Song is a live underdog. He's 6 years younger. He's the local fighter. He's the slightly bigger guy. I think that this is a kind of old guy, washy kickboxing match. And I would favor Muslim Salikhov maybe 3 years ago to win this really cleanly. But at 40, what do we know? Guys get knocked out more often. This guy's been knocked out, finished with strikes in 2 of his last 3 losses. I think he's maybe 2-3 over his last 5 fights. So I don't think Muslim Salikhov is in the prime of his career. He's winning split decisions. He's fighting good guys. No skin off his nose. But I think that Kenan Song is a guy that's been fighting, half decent opponents. Most of the time when you're good, you're going to beat him. If you're okay, he's got a chance to win. And I don't think Muslim Salikhov is a world beater. He does have some sketchy losses on his resume. He's the more talented guy, but age is a factor for me. And I don't know that Muslim Salikhov has, 15 minutes of great fighting in him anymore. So fun fight, decent enough scrap. But again, I just think we have a live underdog in this spot. I think he could outwork him to a close decision. I think he could knock him out. So shout out to our guy Pepe, says Kenan and Muslim is tough to call. I agree with you. Song KO round 2 and 3, sprinkles maybe. Don't think it finishes round 1. Fair enough. Cigarette cardio fight. Homeboys need to start training with Prates. Exactly, man. We need to get that up. James Smith says Joker by brutal finish. Kung Fu KO all day. Kong has some wonderful confidence, not commonplace in WMMA as of late. I love that from Azure. Great comment as well. So yeah, ultimately, guys, I think that this is a weird fight. And Muslim Salikhov, I'll just disclose, maybe I'm biased because I faded the shit out of him with the Leech, right? But at the time, he was favored against the Leech. And I had said that the Leech for me was, the bigger guy, the more athletic guy, the more powerful and dangerous guy. And he went out there and finished Muslim Salikhov as a plus 150 underdog. I had a huge bet on it at the time. So I don't think that Kenan Song is on the level of the Leech. Not at all. But Muslim Salikhov is now all these years older and all these KO losses since. So I just worry that, one errant punch from Kenan Song and he could just be looking at the lights here, despite being the king of Kung Fu. Mbae says 20 significant strikes total in this fight. I think that's funny, man. That's funny. If these two pure strikers go out there and don't throw strikes all night, Uncle Dana is going to have a conniption. All right, here we go, folks. We've got Yan Xiaonan taking on Tabitha Baby Shark Ricci. And it's a theme tonight. I think there's a live underdog here, guys. I've been a Yan Xiaonan fan throughout her run. I've always given her a little bit more respect than some other people I feel in the market in terms of talking her up as a fighter that could contend for a belt and could get to that, that next level. But the thing that has always held her back is her wrestling and her grappling is just subpar. And she realized how bad it was when Carla Esparza took her down and audited her really, really badly in a fight that, like, you've never seen Carla Esparza this violent. You've never seen Carla Esparza this assertive. You've never seen her dominate an opponent like that in all of her MMA career. Seriously. It was like a bully beatdown episode with Carla Esparza and Yan Xiaonan. And what we've seen from her since, when girls are really competent with their takedowns, they take her down. When girls are really assertive with their takedowns, they take her down. And Mackenzie Dern, not a very good wrestler, was able to, grab a hold of her in a side headlock and just throw her to the ground. Right. Don't like that look for her. Don't like the visuals of her getting tossed around by Mackenzie Dern. Don't like the visuals of her getting choked unconscious in the very first round by Zhang Wei Li. And if you look back at that fight, guys, Zhang Weili had her in a fully secured rear naked choke. I thought that the controversy at the time was a little bit overblown. I got to just take my hat off to people and say, you know what? She really looked like she was out, and they had to wake her back up in between rounds. So Yan Xiaonan is a solid enough fighter, but, she's in a tough situation. She's coming off of a title fight loss. We know fighters coming off of title fight losses, they tend to struggle because your next fight will not be as big as your last fight. Here's the other thing that changes. She went from 5 rounds to work, long fight, 25 minutes, to a fight where it's like, okay, now I have to make everything happen in 15 minutes, right? Like if I can't make everything I need happen in the next 15 minutes, I lose the fight. And for me, that makes it a really live underdog, right? Why? Tabitha Ricci, in my humble opinion, needs 2 takedowns to win this fight. If she gets 2 takedowns, I think she can win this fight. Yan Xiaonan is an okay scrambler off her back, not good. She's okay at best. I think she gives up bad positions when she panics on the ground. And I think that when she doesn't do that, she has to be too passive. She has to be too, closed guard minded, right? Just things that are not what you want to see. So when I look at her in this fight, I say, okay, Tabitha Ricci has 5 times secured 2 or more takedowns against her UFC opponents. I believe, let me go pull up UFC stats because I don't want to speak out of turn here. I believe 5 opponents of Yan Xiaonan have taken her down multiple times. Let's confirm. Zhang Weili, 6 takedowns. Mackenzie Dern, 2 takedowns. Carla Esparza, 3 takedowns, finished her in the second round. Claudia Gadelha, 2 takedowns. Kaylin Curran, 2 takedowns. So since 2017, she's given up 2 or more takedowns 5 times in the UFC. Almost every sharp better I know is on Ricci. Not good for my Yan and Kong parlays. Listen, man, I think that when you look at Yan, can she win this fight? Absolutely. If there's no takedowns, I expect that she wins this fight. Point blank. I think she is the more clever striker. I think she is a little bit faster. I think she's more powerful. I think Ricci's getting better on the feet. We've seen her go from not having big strike totals to putting up over 100 significant strikes multiple times. That's the kind of things that I like to see. So when I look at Yan Xiaonan, she's got power. She's got a little bit of decent pop, but she's basically throwing 1-2s, throwing some low kicks, skirting off the line. She's not very likely, in my view, to mix it up with the wrestling and grappling. And when I think about people, shout out to Noah. He says, Yan showed a ton of heart in the title fight. I agree. She showed heart, but she also got choked unconscious, right? She got a little lucky as well. She might not have had the chance to show heart if the fight was properly officiated and adjudicated. So she's a tough girl. We saw against Mackenzie Dern. She's not easy to submit, right? If you just get her to the ground, she's not like, oh, I'm an easy mark. I'm going to easily get submitted. I think to myself, training with Uriah Faber and crew, training with Team Alpha Male, has she gotten better? Yeah, she's gotten better. But has she closed the gap enough? And for me, the answer is I don't think so. I think of a Tabitha Ricci as a girl that I can look at her losses and justify them both, okay? What were the reasons for her losses? She fights Manon Fiorot, who in my opinion is the champ in waiting at 125 pounds. I think when she gets her title opportunity, she will win the belt, period. But she fought up a weight class against a tough girl in Manon Fiorot, and she was way outsized, way in too deep over her head, and she got her foot in the door with the UFC. She saw her way out of the fight. It was for the best, right? It would not have been wise for her to be in that fight any longer. She had no business in there against Manon Fiorot, and the takedowns weren't there. The grappling wasn't there. If she couldn't get her down, she had no path to victory, right? So she got out of the fight. Wise, right? Good career management. Then you look back and you say, okay, now what do we have? She lost to Lupi Godinez via split decision. Lupi Godinez is arguably a top 3, top 5 at the very worst wrestler in the division. Her sisters are on the Canadian national wrestling team for, women's wrestling. Like, these girls know how to scrap. They know how to wrestle. And by the way, Lupi's basic skill set is boxing, which is Tabitha's skill set, and wrestling, which is the thing that you would want to be able to do to prevent somebody from taking you down and doing jiu-jitsu to you. So she was a tough matchup for Lupi Godinez. For Tabitha Ricci. I predicted Lupi Godinez via split decision in that contest. She won a split decision in that contest. And I have also gone to the window before with Tabitha Ricci. When she was going to fight Polyana Viana, everybody told me, Is Polyana Viana really just going to, get taken down by Tabitha Ricci? Or, what if she does? Is she going to armbar her from the guard? And Ricci fought the most boring but smartest fight she could have possibly fought, which is she took her down. She stood up out of every armbar attempt, never let it get close, kicked her in the legs for as long as she needed to, and just did things optically to make sure it was clear she was winning the fight, and let Polyana Viana waste away, kicking away off her back and, kind of acting the fool. So I thought it was a really smart showing from Tabitha Ricci at the time, even though it was boring, even though it was antithetical to what you want to watch as a fight fan. I'll try and call it the way I see it, as a bettor and also as a fan and an analyst. So Tabitha Ricci, does she go out there and blow women out on the ground very often? No. But Carla Esparza didn't either. That's one thing you have to remember, guys. Carla Esparza didn't either. And I could tell you, as a Yan Xiaonan fan, as somebody that has for a long time respected this woman, I picked her to beat Carla Esparza. And it's one of the more embarrassing bets I've ever made in my life, right? You look back, she had nothing. Couldn't defend the takedowns. Could not defend the passes. Armbarred herself. Everything about it was bad and wrong, okay? So if that's the case, has she gotten so much better since then? Not really. The last time out, what we saw from her is that when they were both fresh, Zhang Weili took her down, put her through the grappling paces, and finished her. So I just think to myself, like, Tabitha Ricci only has one submission in the UFC against Jessica Panay. So is she like a lights out grappler at the UFC level? Certainly not. But she's been very reliable to go out there and fight to close decisions, if not win them. So when she's out there having these fights, I feel like she's always live, right? If she can get takedowns, she's live. If she can't get takedowns, it's going to be tough. So Ricci had a 55-45 striking fight with Jillian Robertson. Ricci's nose was all bloody. Yeah, I think she is hittable on the feet, to your point. So I think that when you look at Yan Xiaonan, why'd they match this fight up? That's what our guy Pepe asked in the chat. You have to wonder why the UFC made this matchup. I think there's two reasons. Number one, you have what's called a no-lose situation for the UFC. If Yan Xiaonan wins, what happens? Crowd gets fired up. They get to sell that to the local market. Look at the growth of Chinese MMA. Look at the improvement of Chinese MMA. You can go out there and be a Chinese athlete and get to a title level and be in main events and co-main events in the UFC and win these fights. That's a big, selling point, right? But on the other side, the UFC is a global company, a global brand. They want to always be dealing for all their markets. Think about the fact that they went to France and what ended up happening. Money Moicano put on for the Brazilian people and absolutely stomped a mud hole in Benoit Saint-Denis. He did it right in front of their fans. He told them to go shove it up their ass, right? That's kind of the way it is, right? You look at these fights, it's a global sporting brand. So they want good things to happen for the home crowd. They want to sell, tickets, right? They have to get people in the door. So they got to put people from the local area on the card and these kind of things. But once they have your money, once they have your attention, once you're already a viewer, then there's a little bit more play in the joints, right? And I do think that there's nothing wrong for the UFC if Tabitha Ricci goes out there and wins. They love her boyfriend. They love promoting this guy, Callum Walsh, right? They would have no problem promoting Tabitha Ricci right alongside him, moving her along up the card with their investment, right? So they have no problem with that. But she's got to go out there and handle her end of the bargain. So here's the thing. Fighting is about positioning. They're positioning her in a big spot, a step up, and it's a fight where there's no reasonable expectation she's going to win, right? You ask the market says she shouldn't be favored to win this fight. You ask, the average fan, they're going to say, Yan Xiaonan, she just fought for the title. She fought great. She should obviously be the favorite. So then you say, okay, Tabitha Ricci gets to go in there with no pressure on her shoulders, right? Basically risk-free and go out there and take on this woman. Now what's the answer? It's like, Yan Xiaonan has more pressure on her back coming into this fight for 10 reasons, right? How about this? She's coming off a loss. So more pressure on your back when you're coming off a loss. More pressure on your back when you're coming from a title fight, 5 rounds, big spot, big opportunity, back down the card. 3-round fight against a lower contender, moving the wrong direction, right? I was moving up the card, moving up the rankings, now moving my way back down. It's the ebbs and flows, the rise and fall that's very natural in fighting. And so I think to myself, okay, is it so important to this card for the Chinese crowd that Yan Xiaonan wins this fight? My honest answer is no. right? And the reason I say that is multifaceted. Here's the first reason. Zhang Weili is the champion. So like the champion of this weight class is a Chinese athlete. So I think that in terms of like, are they well represented in this weight class? Yeah. Are they well represented in this division? Sure. Are there a ton of Chinese athletes on this fight card that could all go out there and have star-making performances? Yes. And so for me, those are the reasons why I'm a little bit more skeptical of Yan Xiaonan, because she's on the wrong end of the age curve, right? Wrong side of 30. She's 35 years of age. Meanwhile, Ricci on the right side of 30, still accruing a lot of UFC experience herself. So Yan Xiaonan has fought the tougher girls. She's been in there for longer, got more experience. There's a lot to like about Yan Xiaonan. Made a lot of improvements over time. One of the most improved fighters in the UFC. But have we seen enough from her being horrible on the ground to say that there is some room for her making categorical errors and dropping either the round or the fight with one mistake? Yeah, in my opinion, there's a huge possibility for that. And here's the last thing I'll note on this fight. When I look at Yan Xiaonan and the fact that she had that big moment, that big opportunity last time out, some people, that's going to relight the fire. It's going to tell them like, get back and recommit and do all this stuff. But for other people, it's just a realization, and a really hard one, that like, hey, I tried everything. I put in all the work. I went over to, I went to America. I put in all this time and this sweat equity, and it just didn't work out, so what's next? Or, what am I going to do? How do I rebuild from here? And not everybody finds the answers. You'll find a lot of times watching fighting, people fight for titles and then things don't work out for them for whatever reason. Dominic Reyes, right? Everybody ubiquitously believed that he beat John Jones, right? He beat John Jones. It was a whole controversy. And so I got Jan Blachowicz plus 205 against him after this guy beat John Jones. And then what happened? MMA is still MMA at the end of the day. People went out there and had a fight, and it was still a fight. So the body kick still hurt him, and you don't get the credit for what you did last time, this fight. And so Yan Xiaonan last time out showed heart, toughness, willingness, all that stuff. But now at 35 years of age, she's got to defend her ranking against somebody that's hungry, that wants it, that's coming to get it, and that has a path to victory, in my view, which is take her down twice, you win the fight. Take her down and dominate, get to a good position. You could look like Carla Esparza and get a finish that you never get by passing the guard, right? Now, it doesn't have to be great sophistication. All that Carla did was take her down, pass the guard, and beat the shit out of her and made it look really, really easy if you go back and rewatch that fight. So she's gotten way better since then. But Mackenzie Dern isn't great with ground and pound. That's not her selling point. She went for, arm bars and kimuras and all these things that are really fancy, a little too clever by half. I think the way you beat Yan Xiaonan is you play bully ball, you punch, and then you grab a hold of something. And I think she could do that. So for me, Tabitha Ricci is the side here, but it's a fun fight, competitive fight, man. And I do think, like I said, if Yan Xiaonan D's up all the takedowns, I think she's cruising to a unanimous decision here. I think she'll just be a little too clean for Tabitha on the feet. But for me, like I think that Tabitha could win a round on the feet. I think that it would be very difficult for Yan Xiaonan to win a round that's all grappling. So Ricci by sub is plus 1,000. Saw that as well, says Sigma. But the ITD, I will tell you, is like plus 850 or something. It's like also a huge number. Mbe says Yan might get a takedown here. I mean, God bless. I think that would be foolish of her to go for one, honestly. I think that she's more likely to lose getting submitted on top than I think she is to have a ton of success from on top, personally. But I'm open to being wrong, Mbe. I'll give you credit if I'm wrong. Yan KO, fair enough, Moise. I think she is live for that. She does have power, good counters. So I think if Ricci's not getting any takedowns, then the KO is certainly live. Mbe says Ricci is not dangerous. Okay, we'll see. Neither is Carla Esparza, though. I'll just tell you, man. Neither is Carla, and she beat the absolute shit out of her. Alrighty, guys. Main event. Gotta say, thank you to everybody for rocking with us. We got a big stream going right now. 563 people rocking with us on X. If you're live with us on X, make sure you hit that follow button. Make sure you hit the like button. Hit the retweet if you're feeling so kind and generous. If you're here with us on YouTube, guys, drop a like on the show. It will help other people find us. If you have questions, comments, concerns, go ahead and fire those off in the comment section down below. In the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and take a big swig of coffee so we can get fired up for this main event. Oh, yeah. Petr Yan, no mercy, taking on Deiveson Figueiredo. For me, here's the one number that stands out big among these numbers on screen, guys. 36 going on 37 in the bantamweight division. Oh, that's old, not young. Petr Yan, people are talking about this guy like he's washed as an MMA fighter, and he's not yet 32 years of age. So in terms of just like, when you were looking at the Song Yadong fight, I'm not typically a Petr Yan guy. If you look, like, I'm typically a Petr Yan fader of the highest order. I bet Corey Sandhagen against him, and he had some early success, then got found out over the course of those 25 minutes. I bet Aljamain Sterling against him. Not the first time, guys. The second time. The time where Aljamain Sterling explained, I had an injury, guys. I was hurt. I got neck surgery. I feel so much better now. I'm stronger now. You could see it on tape, right? You go back and look at the first fight. No one will ever convince me Aljo wasn't injured. No one will ever convince me. You know why? Aljo said it with his own words that I was too weak physically to grab a hold of him. You go back and rewatch, you will see a man that is typically an excellent grappler physically unable to grab a hold of his opponent, right? Aljo was getting thrown around like he was a toy, like he was a punk, right? Knew nothing about wrestling. That's not Aljo. So even if you want to say like Petr Yan is still the better fighter, I would say like, okay, fair enough. I think the evidence is a little bit in dispute of that, but you could definitely make the argument, right? Because he did do so well in the first fight, and he did fight to a competitive split decision the second time. But what changed? The second time out, Aljo looked strong. He looked like himself. And when he got takedowns, they mattered. He went 2 of 22 on takedown attempts. If you look back, John Dodson got multiple takedowns against Petr Yan. He went 2 of 8 on takedown attempts. Merab Dvalishvili got multiple takedowns on Petr Yan. He's the third, and that rounds out our list, right? Only 3 guys have ever taken him down multiple times in the UFC. And when you look at Merab, it was 11 of 49 attempts. So in order to get 2 takedowns on Petr Yan, no one has ever attempted less than 8 takedowns to pull off that, right? This guy is a very good wrestler, and I don't know that he gets credit for that. If you look at what Petr Yan is credited for, he gets credit for his boxing, for his striking, for his power, for, his tenacity, for building in 5-round fights. He gets credit for those things, but I don't know that he gets enough credit for being a very difficult guy to out-wrestle, to out-grapple. Aljamain Sterling, very dominant grappler. He got Corey Sandhagen down when they were both fresh in the first round. How'd that turn out for Corey? Instantly choked him to sleep, right? It's like, this guy, Aljamain Sterling, is a very dominant top player. You look at the fight with Petr Yan. Aljo beat his ass. Aljo controlled him from that back body triangle. Did he ever come close to submitting him, though? It would, like, Aljo really tried. Aljo, like, really committed to his offense there. He was not able to submit him. So I think that, could Figgy be the first guy to submit him? Yeah. Figgy is sensational on the mat. I've talked about it before. His offense flows. There's some guys that have good submissions. One of them, this guy just goes attack to attack to attack, and he's very clever. He almost reminds you of a Charles Oliveira in that sense of the word. When he gets a hold of you, he could tap you, and he's very, very dangerous, right? He can go leg entanglements. He can go upper body, right? Attack the arms. He can go to the neck and choke you unconscious. He could go to the rear naked choke. He put Joey B to sleep with that. So when I look at Deiveson Figueiredo, I respect the shit out of this man. He's a former champion of the 125-pound weight class. He's a guy that's got power in his hands. He's a guy that closes the distance with blitzing, single shots that hurt people, that put him down. He's got a great win. Ages like fine wine over Pantoja. I mentioned that on my Twitter account, on my X account, whatever you want to call it, at LiamPicksFights. If you guys don't follow me over there, try and put out good video, content throughout the week. And I talked about some of these concepts that we're talking about now on the show, but Deiveson Figueiredo, since he went to the bantamweight division, 3-0 in the division. So he's done a great job since moving up to bantamweight. Do we want to put some caveats? We do. If you look at the last fight with Marlon Chito Vera, his sequencing was perfect, right? He ended up getting the moments at the times when it counted to win the fight. But we definitely saw that Deiveson Figueiredo can be hurt at this weight class. He did get hurt in that fight, did get buzzed pretty badly in that contest. So then you look at, okay, shout out to our guy, Noah. Noah's baseball videos says, Liam, appreciate your hard work always. Thank you so much, Noah. It's always my pleasure. Thank you very much for the dono, my brother. And we're looking to try and pick some great winners on these cards, but also try and give some great analysis along the way. I really appreciate the kind words and the support, my man. And back to the action. What we've got with Deiveson Figueiredo is a guy that he beat Rob Font, but Rob Font is a little bit, struggling in the division, right? He just got back into the win column. It was a huge deal for Rob Font to get back in the win column because he had been struggling, because he had been on a little bit of a career downswing, basically was fighting for his job and his career last time out and got the win. But I want to go pull this up because at the beginning of the year, I put together a UFC futures article. And if you guys have been rocking with the show for a long time, then you probably know exactly what I'm about to say. But I talk about, a few of these different divisions. And I was pretty proud of the research that I did, because if you look for the bantamweight division, I had the men's bantamweight division current champion, Sean O'Malley. Odds to remain champion was plus 275. And I listed the most likely guys to be champion at the end of the year as O'Malley and Merab. And if you guys have been paying attention to MMA lately, they just fought for the title. I thought they were the two most likely guys to be in this opportunity. And I don't think we're going to see either one of them defend before the year is out. So it was Merab plus 375, did highlight it in my article. But why are we talking about it during this breakdown, you ask? Here's why. I put 3 dark horses and I said that they weren't value, right? Like I didn't see any of these guys having actual value, but when people ask you to identify a futures article, you have to try and account for what could go wrong, what could be unique and different that other people aren't thinking of. So Nurmagomedov was the obvious one, right? I said the odds were too presumptuous, but it was very clear that when he gets a title opportunity, he's going to be favored. If not, he's going to be very closely lined. So we know that Nurmagomedov was an option you have to include in this list. The one whiff that I had, Song Yadong, right? Song Yadong lost to Petr Yan. That essentially eliminated him from title conversations for at least a year and a half. If he goes back out there, gets a win, 2 wins, 3 wins under his belt, he's right back in the conversation. But he was supposed to be in a fight with Petr Yan in China. If you remember, it didn't end up working out. They couldn't end up making it happen. Whatever went on, they canceled the event. All these different things have gone wrong. He beat Chris Gutierrez in a main event. It was a little bit lackluster, and that's why they gave him Petr Yan, in my view. They kind of said, hey, you know what? You blew it with that last easier opportunity we gave you, so here's what we'll give you instead. And it was a tough fight. So if you say, absolutely, Scan Hunt. That's what we were saying before. Merab actually went for 49 takedown attempts. So this guy D's up takedowns like nobody's business. But back to the futures article. Here's where we'll close out our thoughts on this. Figueiredo plus 1,600. 5.9% implied. Nobody was talking about Figueiredo at the beginning of the year. This is in December of last year, by the way. I said Figgy stands out as a potentially wide line here because he's 1-0 as a UFC bantamweight with a top 10 win over Font in his debut. He is also a former champion and he represents the important Brazilian market. I think him beating O'Malley is very unlikely, but not impossible. However, if O'Malley vacates the belt, Figgy could slide into a vacant title opportunity with one more relevant win in the division. So, why do we talk about this? We talk about it because since that time, Figgy is now 3-0 in the division. He won at UFC 300. Big card. He was on that card. Got a win over a former champion in Cody Garbrandt. That's a big win for him. Got the submission as well. Showed I can finish in this division. But then the very close fight with Marlon Chito Vera, right? The fight that kind of showed us, hey, you know what? Marlon Chito Vera was levels below Sean O'Malley when they fought for the title. So maybe Figueiredo is a little bit more of a figment of our memory, as well as, a guy that has shown up in these big moments on the stat line. It's not coming through that he's a very, very productive bantamweight. We're seeing that he's actually less effective in the bantamweight division than the flyweight division. And the other thing I will note here, guys, a lot of people feared Deiveson Figueiredo at 125 pounds. He hit too hard. They were getting backed up with the power. They could not stand in the pocket with the guy. He would hurt them too badly. And then what's the alternative, right? I take it to the ground where this guy's a wizard. Like, it was very, very difficult, for most people to deal with this guy. But now in the 135 pound class, I'll tell you on average, I think that these guys are a little bit heavier handed, right? Like 135ers just carry a little bit more power overall. So Figueiredo, who's been tested on the chin a little bit before, he could be tested on the chin again. And Petr Yan, he's a guy that builds into these fights. So now we'll go back to the Tapology page. I look at a guy like Petr Yan, and for a while, I was real down on him. Like I said, I just kept betting big plus money numbers against this guy. And I still understand the logic behind it, which is, hey, does he really have submission upside against Figueiredo? I don't see that personally. I think I'd be stunned, most stunned if that's the outcome of this fight, right? Petr Yan by submission would be a brain blast for me. I would be, picking up a piece of my own brain off the sidewalk. If you look at, I don't want that to be misinterpreted. I mean, from my brain exploding, my mind being blown. That's all I meant by that. You sickos out there. But in any case, I look at Petr Yan, and what I see is a guy that has beautiful boxing combinations, very underrated wrestling, both offensive and defensive. He's very difficult to submit. So he's probably going to be the guy, in my opinion, who gets better as time goes on. You look at Deiveson Figueiredo at 36 years of age, in a new weight class. Not cutting weight is important. I think that helps him in terms of the cardio. But he's a guy who's a little bit low volume on purpose. He manages his energy. He throws everything 100%. His scrambles are 100%. I go, 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 go. So unless he gets to dominant control style top positions, his style is too labor intensive for him to really commit to it at all times. He's got to really pick his spots. And against Petr Yan, have we seen guys hurt him? Few and far between, but we have seen it, right? And O'Malley, you think of, right? Buzzed him a little bit on the feet, landed some heavy shots. Merab actually hurt him physically, right? Like hurt him in his leg, kicked his legs out from under him, beat the shit out of him, landed like 149 significant strikes in that fight as well. When I look at Petr Yan, what do you have to do to kill this guy? Like, the guy's resilience is off the charts. Merab Dvalishvili put on one of the most soul-sucking performances of all time. Like, this guy's out there just in a emotional, heated rivalry, right? With a guy that there's national, regional pressures and everything being brought to bear on this fight. And you're out there in a meat grinder, getting put through the ringer, getting all your energy sapped, getting beat up, getting hurt, getting crumbled. And he never gave up on himself, never quit, never threw in the towel. Just remarkable. Honestly, like, that is one of the most one-sided UFC fights of all time. I bet Merab at plus 225 in that fight. You'll never see Merab at plus 225 again, unless he's fighting under Magomedov. But if you look at that, you say to yourself, like, this guy, different, right? Like, you have to literally kill him or he's not giving up. He's not going to quit. He's not going to concede. So could Figueiredo put him to sleep? Yeah, I think he could. He's that kind of guy, man. He's that good. But how do I see this fight going? I see Petr Yan taking over this fight as it goes on. I think it's going to start off competitive. I think they're going to go out there. They're going to, get in the center. They're going to be working their game a little bit. Figueiredo is going to land some good shots, some good body work, a couple nice low calf kicks. He might get a takedown. I think it would be really smart. If I'm in Figueiredo's corner, I'd be telling him, like, go out there and try and submit this guy fast, because when he's dry, when he's still getting into the fight, we know he's not the fastest starter in the world, probably less likely that he's going to hurt you if you take bigger risks. So go out there, get a hold of this guy early, put him in the spin cycle, and test where his jiu-jitsu is really at. I think that's the best way for Figueiredo to try and maximize his win condition. If he wants to win a decision, I think he's going to have to be very cognizant about his energy management. I think he's going to need to try to pull off the Aljo. What is the Aljo, guys? Back take to a body lock and don't move. Hold it. Do what you need to do to grind out the time. If you remember, Aljo did a great job using his physicality. He's bigger than Yan. So he would get on top of Yan, roll the wrists, elbows to the head, force Yan to make a lot of the movements, a lot of the choices on the ground defensively, and Aljo would just flow. Aljo can go all night in a grappling context. He doesn't get tired doing that. But when you force him into a striking fight, into a back and forth fight, into a fight where we have to switch phases, it's much more exhausting for anybody, not just Aljo, but for anybody. So Aljo realized, if I'm going to fight this guy and we're going all 25 minutes, I need to get back body triangles and hold them and make this guy as tired as I am later in the fight. That was really smart. And so I think that for Deiveson Figueiredo, that's something his camp and his corner needs to know. Like, we need to try and take this guy's back as early as possible, as often as possible, no matter what. Because if we can't get the submission, we could try and bank rounds and make this guy tired, take some juice out of his legs. If he doesn't accomplish that, I think Petr Yan by round 3 is going to be too much in terms of his willingness to come forward, create violent clashes. Deiveson Figueiredo has had a few times. The Brandon Moreno trilogy, quadrilogy, whatever you want to call it, comes to mind, right? We had a draw in that contest. He slowed down in that fight. We had, he landed big shots, right? He landed huge, impactful shots, but he did slow down in that fight. We saw him slow down in the fight where he got submitted, right? Over 3 rounds. And again, he was cutting weight to 125. There's some factors here. We saw his eye get swollen shut, right? Real big problem for him in terms of the facial damage. Petr Yan throws a lot to the head. He's going to try and damage you up. He's going to try and mark you up. He's going to try and bust your face up. He's a boxer to his core. But this guy's wrestling is fucking lights out. So I don't think Deiveson Figueiredo has enough energy to wrestle this guy all night. Like, I don't think he can go out there and attempt the 10 takedowns that it would probably take to get 2 or 3. So I think Figgy needs to maximize his win condition early, or he needs to bank some early rounds, or he's going to be up shit's creek without a paddle, because Petr Yan loves going deep in fights. He loves fighting hard, difficult contests. And I thought that his showing against Song Yadong was very clever. Song Yadong is young, strong, hungry, wants it, gangster, powerful. He's looking to take your head off, man. And he fought that fight brilliantly. He mixed up his martial arts, man. When he needed the takedowns, he got to the takedowns, put him on his ass. He did the same thing against Sean O'Malley. And now people want to say, like, oh, Sean O'Malley made him a wrestler and this and that. But we all on the night also were surprised and confused that he didn't get the decision, because he mixed his martial arts better and he probably should have gotten the win, right? So it was very close, very arguable. I'm not saying it was a blowout, but it's like Yan did more MMA things better than Sean O'Malley did on the night. He landed big shots too. Make no mistake. He did damage too. They both busted each other up, landed huge shots. But then the difference was the better wrestler and grappler, which is another phase of fighting. It was Yan. And so in this fight, I don't think he's the better grappler, but I think he's as good a wrestler, or good enough a wrestler to stop Figueiredo's advances on the mat. And I think he is actually the better striker on the feet. I think both guys are quality, capable on the feet. Both guys have been swollen up before. Merab Dvalishvili, I think it might have been a clash of heads, but he did have, Petr Yan looking like an alien. And Deiveson Figueiredo, I mentioned when he got busted up by that hook from Brandon Moreno, his eye was a swollen mess. So both these guys, scrappers, champions, guys that deserve to be here in big fights and big main events. I must say, this is one of the UFC main events I'm most fired up for. But give me Petr Yan as the pick. I think he gets it done in round 4, 5, or via decision. Shout out to Pejan in the chat. Says Petr Yan wins by knockout in round 5. We're seeing the fight largely the same way, man. I think he's going to take over late with his striking, get the finish late, but certainly fun fight. And I also want to note that where is the comment from Mbe? I thought that Mbe had said something about Yan losing before at this price. Let me see if I can find it in the next 2 seconds. I don't think so. But in any case, Yan has lost in these price ranges before, right? I think he lost to O'Malley as a minus 250 favorite. I think he lost to Aljamain Sterling as a minus 400 or something. So definitely people have been too bullish on him in the past. I'll just let you guys know, I haven't always been there with them, right? I've been a little bit more of a Yan skeptic and a Figueiredo supporter. And I just think that this is a tough matchup for Figueiredo personally. And I could definitely be wrong, but that's the way I see this one. So thank you guys all very much for your support, for all the questions, the comments, the chat. I really appreciate it, guys. I want to say shout out to Junior Smooth, says just subbed. Appreciate the live listen, brother. I appreciate you for being here. Thank you very much for showing up. We appreciate new people that stop by, that join in on the fun. Thank you guys very much. I want to just let you know, we do this each and every week for the UFC. So whether it's the first look where I come in, before I've done all my tape study and my research and let you know, hey, this is my past experience betting on these fighters. This is how I've done. These are my analysis on some of these fighters. These are the things I remember. Then we circle back later on in the week and we talk about my analysis, right? I've done a lot more research in the interim. I've watched a lot more fights, and that tries to give me a little bit of a deeper perspective to come back and revisit with. Typically, we have a guest on Bets and Banter later in the week. We're going to get back to that in the very near future. I have been scrambling with some stuff in my personal life. I'm about to start a coaching position, a wrestling coaching job. So I've been sidetracked by some bureaucracy for the state of New York and making sure I'm all squared away with my requirements and stuff there. But now it's full steam ahead into the new year, guys, because what we're looking at is a couple more events to close out this year, and then it's right back to it. So we'll have new futures articles that are underway and a lot more analysis and stuff to break down. So thank you guys for the support. We'll see if we're live later on tonight. Might have some friends stopping by for a 3 a.m. rendezvous, steak, eggs, and fights. Nothing better than that. But in the interim, I just want to say thank you to everybody who supports the channel. The easiest way to do that, hit the subscribe button. If you never want to miss a live show like this, hit the notification bell. That will let you know, hey, channel's going live. So that way you guys can make the choice. You don't have to pop in, but that way you'll at least know. So that way you don't comment after, bro, I can't believe I missed the live. We do have some people that hit me with that every so often. So appreciate you guys for that support. If you want to go one step further, if you want access to all my notes, my write-ups, my information, I will go ahead and pull up on the screen for a second the UFC Macau navigation doc, just so you guys have an idea of what I do. There's a lot of people that have picks and bets in the space, and there's lots of great people that do that. The thing that I do that I think is unique is I have been cultivating MMA information for years and years and years. And so some of these fighters, right, I might have, a ton of information. Some of them, I might just have a couple of notes I took on 2 or 3 of their fights. But if you are a person that really likes studying mixed martial arts, if you're a person that wants to have more information, if you believe in having more information before you make a bet, then it's not expensive. It's a very cheap way to get a lot more information. I've been writing up Petr Yan fights since 2021. Deiveson Figueiredo, same type of deal. And also I've been writing articles for other major companies for a while. So my main card write-ups, whatever, I link to them. I tell you who the fight was against. Then you can go look for yourself whether I was right or wrong, whether I got the analysis correct or not. But I think that it's a helpful resource for me when I go back and do these analyses, and I try and make it pretty clear and organized. So all the fighters that I have tape studies on, this is a document that's about 4 pages long. And that's not including the writing that I did for this week, right? These are all just mostly old write-ups that I've done. So there you have it, guys. If you're interested in that, you can be a channel member. You can find it on Patreon. We also talk in there all night about these fights, and we're going to be doing a lot more of that. I'm not going to be going to sleep the rest of the way. So God bless, guys. Good luck to each and every one of you guys, whether you're betting on this card or not. And I just want to say good luck to you all. Come back next time. We're having all the same fun again. Thanks, everybody. Cheers.